Hi, how is it going? Welcome to Code with Z. In today's video, we gotta go from this array of intervals to this array that we have here. Why? Good question. Because that's what LeetCode 56 Marge Intervals is asking us to do. Now, I want you to know that I'll explain and visualize everything in the coming slides, literally everything. But for the sake of reading the question, let's see what the question is actually asking us for. So as you can see, we're given an array of intervals where each interval has a starting point and an ending point. We gotta merge all of the overlapping intervals and then return the array of non-overlapping intervals. So long story short, we gotta get rid of overlaps in our intervals array. Now let's check this example in our slides. Let's see when we go from this array to this array here. How did we actually come up with this? Well, I think the best way to explain this is to draw this array that we have here. We're gonna literally draw it. These are gonna be our individual intervals inside of our array. So we basically have a starting point and an ending point. For example, the starting point here is 1 and the ending point here is 3. So if we actually draw this, we're gonna go from 1 to 3, like so. This is gonna be representing this interval that we have here. And then if we move on to the next one, the starting point of this one is gonna be 2 and the ending point of this one is gonna be 6. So you basically go from 2 to 6, right? And then we're gonna keep on drawing. We're gonna move on to this one. The starting point of this one is gonna be 8, and the ending point is gonna be 10, like so, 8 and 10. And then we're gonna move on to the last one. The starting point of this one is gonna be 15, and the ending point is gonna be 18, like so, from 15 to 18. So this is basically representing our array that we have here. Now, if we take a closer look, we can actually see some overlaps. For example, here, we go from 1 to 3, but we also go from 2 to 6. And I think we can all agree that there has to be a way to combine these two so we can actually get rid of this overlap that we have here. So for getting rid of this overlap, we're gonna have one simple golden rule. Each time we're gonna have a current interval and we're gonna have a next interval. As you can see, now our current interval is gonna be from 1 to 3, from 1 to 3, and our next interval is gonna be from 2 to 6, from 2 to 6. Now that we've identified our current and next intervals, we're gonna say if the start of the next interval is smaller or equal of the end of the current interval, merge these together. Now, what does this mean? Well, the start of the next interval is gonna be 2, right? And the end of the current interval is gonna be 3. Is 2 smaller or equal than 3? Well, yeah, this is correct. And we're gonna merge them like this. We're gonna go from the start of the current one all the way to the maximum end between these two. The maximum end is gonna be 6. So we're gonna go from 1 to 6, like so. As you can see, we've merged these two and now we have from 1 to 6. But the reason I say we go from the start to the maximum end is because, for example, if this was from 1 to 7, we will still have an overlap, but we would choose the 7. So in each round when we merge, we're gonna go from the start of the current one all the way to the maximum end between our two intervals. And now currently it's gonna be from 1 to 6. And then after we've done this, we're gonna be like, all right, let's see if we have other overlaps. We're gonna have our golden rule again. We're gonna say, now this is gonna be our current and this is gonna be our next. Why? Well, because we've taken care of this one already. So we're gonna move on to the next one and our current is gonna stay the same because we wanna check if we still have more overlaps. We're gonna be like, all right, is the start of the next, meaning 8, smaller or equal to the end of the current, which is 6. So is 8 smaller or equal than 6? Not really, this is not gonna be correct. So we're not gonna have an overlap and we're just gonna add this to our array like so. Because we didn't have an overlap, we will literally copy this and put it here. And then we're gonna move on to the next one. And this round, this is gonna be our current and this is gonna be our next. We're gonna check this again. We're gonna say, is the start of the next, which is basically 15, smaller or equal than the end of the current, which is 10. So is 15 smaller or equal to 10? Not really, so we're not gonna merge and we're just gonna copy and paste it here, like so. And because we don't have anything else to check, that means we're done and this is gonna be our answer and we're just gonna return this. Believe it or not, we're done. Now let's code this in the simplest way possible. Alrighty, let's first define our result array that we're gonna push our answers to. This is just gonna be an empty array. And then to make things more readable, we're gonna define a start variable and this is gonna be basically 0. So basically this here, instead of saying interval at the index of 0, we're gonna say interval at the index of start. That's gonna make our code more readable. And then we obviously need to have an end variable as well. And this is gonna be 1. And this is gonna be representing this because in each array, in each interval, we're gonna have a starting point and an ending point. The starting point is gonna be always at the index of 0 of that array. And the ending point is always gonna be at the index of 1. Now we gotta start from something, right? When we start, the current interval is gonna be the first one, right? Because as we saw in the slides, the first time when we check for our golden rule, this is gonna be our current interval, the first one. So we're gonna say, let current interval be equal to intervals at the index of 0. Then we're gonna define a for loop to loop through our intervals. We're gonna say for let I being equal to 1, and we wanna keep on looping as long as I is smaller than intervals, $length, and we want to increment I on each round. The reason we start from the index of 1 is because we've already taken care of the index of 0, because our current interval is equal to the interval at the index of 0. Here we're going to define our next interval just like we saw in the slides. We're going to say our next interval is going to be intervals at the index of I. Now we got to compare our current interval and our next interval. So we're going to have our golden rule. Let me just copy paste it here. We're going to say start of next. So we're going to say if next interval at the index of start is smaller or equal to current interval at the index of end, do the following. We got to merge them, right? So we're going to say our current interval at the index of end is going to be equal to math.max. If you remember, we said the maximum value between the current interval at the index of end. Let me drag this to the left. So the maximum end between the current interval and the next interval at the index of end. And this is gonna take care of our merge, just like we saw in the slides. Else, meaning if this was not the case, meaning if we didn't have an overlap, we just wanna add our current interval to our result and we wanna move on to the next one, right? So we're gonna say result dot push of current interval, and then we're gonna say current interval is gonna be equal to next interval because we wanna compare the next one with the next interval that we're gonna have. When we're done, we're gonna have the last interval left over because when we reach here, this is gonna be our current interval, but there's nothing to compare it with, right? So we're just gonna end up exiting the loop without adding it to our result. So at the end of our for loop, we gotta make sure that we add the last interval, which is gonna be our current interval, to our result, and then we're gonna return our result. Now, there's one more thing. As you can see, this is basically sorted. We have 1, 3, 2, 6, 8, 10, 15, 18. This is sorted, right? But we do have examples in the test cases where our intervals are not sorted. So you have to sort these in the beginning. And to sort this, I'm just gonna say intervals is gonna be equal to intervals dot sort A and B. This is just how we sort an array of arrays in JavaScript, like so. Now, this is gonna be all of our code. Let's run it and see if we're gonna get accepted. Moment of truth. I hope I've not made any typos. I have. Let me actually add a T here, like so. Now let's run it again. Sorry for that. And we got accepted. That's awesome. Let me submit it and see if we're gonna pass all of the test cases. Drum roll, please. I'm just kidding. That's awesome. And we're beating 88% of all of the other submissions, even though that number is random, but still awesome. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and keep on coding.